This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to Behind the Headlines. I'm Maura Donnelly, an associate of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Charlie Greenawalt, our usual host, is on assignment, but I am very pleased to have Jerry Strittmatter with us. Welcome.
Hi, Maura.
Jerry is a board member and a former legislator, so we're really happy to have your expertise today.
Oh, thank you very much. I look forward to learning a lot from our guests.
We're going to learn a lot today. I have a hunch. We are going to talk about antibiotics. And to help us with that, we have Mary Pat Frick, who is an RN and a BSN, and she is the clinical project manager and in charge of infection preventionist at Masonic Village. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome. And this is a very, very critical topic. And so why don't you tell our viewers right off the bat why we're here to talk about antibiotics?
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, those in the infection field, they want us to be called infection preventionists. So it sounds like
preventionist.
It sounds like a made-up name, but it actually is.
Okay.
It is a job description. It actually is a real position. And why I wanted to come today, and I'm so grateful you let me do that, is to let your viewers know about this issue with the overuse or inappropriate use of antibiotics.
Yeah. Overprescription
yes.
of antibiotics.
Yes.
Let's call it what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And antibiotics are great. They've been good. However, through the years, just the over-prescribing of them and the inappropriate use of antibiotics, meaning prescribing antibiotics for things that are viral.
Okay. And antibiotics are used for bacterial
Yes, antibiotics kill bacteria.
Right.
They're an antibiotic, yes.
But if you have a virus, not going to help you.
No, and some of you, I know I've experienced, you go to the doctor, you are sick.
Yeah.
You are sick, and they're going to say, you know what, this is viral. I'm not going to give you an antibiotic. And you're kind of stunned by it, but it's a viral, and antibiotics do not do anything against viruses.
But if you're taking them for a virus, they can be very harmful.
They can.
Yeah.
See, and that's the thing with antibiotics, like any drug, antibiotics have side effects. They can have side effects. And if you're prescribed an antibiotic when you don't need one, say you had a viral infection, you can end up with something as simple as thrush, where you get this yellow coating on your tongue because the antibiotic has stripped good bacteria in your mouth, and now yeast has taken over, so now you have to get a prescription for nystatin, an antifungal or anti-yeast medicine to treat it. You won't get better quicker. It takes about 7 days to get over a cold, or about a week with aggressive antibiotic treatment.
Wow.
Well, thank you for being here.
That's a joke, by the way. It's
right.
an IP joke. It's the same amount of time because it's most colds are viruses.
5 days coming,
So
5 days going.
7 days. It'll take you 7 days to get better with a cold, or 7 days with an antibiotic. A week or 7 days.
Same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it'll
It's not
just
gonna
run
help
its
you.
course.
Right.
No, and especially for me, I work at the Masonic Villages at Elizabethtown in their long-term care. Well, I oversee all the residents on campus, but
So
mainly
this is
I work
elder
in there.
care, correct? Or is it
It's the Department of Health has come out now with a campaign for antibiotic resistance to let the public know, because it's not just for elderly people. This a problem with overuse of antibiotics. It's for everybody.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, because it all causes antibiotics can cause side effects that that you may not want. And for me, working with the elderly, the big problem is, especially in a long-term care setting, what happens is you end up with multi-drug resistant organisms. That's bacteria. We have bacteria now that are resistant to antibiotics that they shouldn't be resistant to.
And that's because they were overprescribed to that individual.
Yeah,
and
that
they've
bacteria
built up a resistance.
builds up a resistance,
Yeah.
and that'll keep continuing, and that's a problem, because something like for an elderly person in a nursing home with an uncomplicated urinary tract infection. That could be anybody at home as well in the community where you're not really sick, but you're sick. You know, something simple like Bactrim or Cipro, those type of antibiotics that have been around for a long time. They're great, they work, they're cheap. That, you know, it is a cost thing too. Should work, but the overprescribing of these antibiotics, now those are the two that are really becoming least effective against simple infections.
Too much of the bacteria has become resistant to that, and then it spreads from one person to another. Besides, it
can by contaminated hands. That happens in the nurse, especially in hospital settings or in nursing homes where one person may have a multi-drug resistant organism in their body, and because of poor hand hygiene with the residents or staff who are not washing their hands in between, can pass that organism to the other person. Oh my goodness. And that bacteria can get into that person and cause
into the daycare
resistance.
Center, and then it's into 30 families that night too. So it's so wonderful you're here, so our viewers get to hear that they really need to pay attention to this, because we do have many in the healthcare field that specialize. And of course, you go through those specialists, and the specialists will be looking and not only taking care of what you came for, but they're also going to be looking at what else is going on. So they might be, as a preventative, whatever, you know, giving these, you know, antibiotics that really they're not needed, but they want to just make sure. Well, that needs to be coordinated, and that's why it's great you're here, so everybody knows, either taking care of a loved one or taking care of themselves, that they've got to really keep track of everything that they take, and especially working through their pharmacists to make sure that, do I really need these things? And so I'm so happy you're here to tell us about all this.
Exactly, and if I'm not a spokesperson for the Department of Health, but they really do. The Pennsylvania Department of Health has some really great info sheets, like one sheet, easy to read, information regarding all things about, I've been prescribed an antibiotic, now what? Antibiotics are good, but there's you know, you have to be aware of things. Right. It's more like, I think with our parents' generation, the doctor knows best. The doctor says, I think you have a urinary tract infection here. Here's a prescription for an antibiotic for 10 days. Well, now, no, that is not what we call best practice.
Oh.
Best practice is what you want. It's the standard. That's what you want to be able to, the type of health care you want to deliver to your loved one or you want to receive as a patient. And best practices now, and this is the big thing with long-term care facilities in our antibiotic stewardship program, is we have a program, we have policies in place, and our medical director has been wonderful, and he's established treatment plans that before you prescribe an antibiotic, you know, they have to ask themselves, is it appropriate? You know, prescribing an antibiotic for someone that you think may have a UTI, you're not sure yet, can you wait to prescribe that antibiotic until you get a urine culture back till the lab has a chance to process it, see if there is any bacteria in it, and if there is bacteria, they do a test upon what antibiotics will work against that organism. Oh. See that?
And for lesser days.
Now it's about 3 days. It takes about 3 days.
Of a 10-day prescription,
so what we're asking physicians, and what this antibiotic stewardship program, and physicians are becoming more aware of this, especially in long-term care. You know, it takes about 3 days for a culture to come back. You know, can you wait? Can you hold off? Now, if that person is extremely sick, we also don't want physicians to treat lab results. We want to be treated, but we want them to treat us and not what the labs say. If we call them residents in long-term care, they're residents, they're not patients. You know, if they're not really sick, can you wait? Can you wait to see, so you get more information that will help you specify what medication will work? Or if they are really, really sick, you know, you're going to treat, but maybe can you treat for just 3 days and
you've
then
seen
reevaluate?
Great success.
You know,
exactly. You know, to tell our viewers that this really does work.
Yes,
if you've been tracking this in just 1 year, tell us about the success you've had in just 1 year.
Our facility is one of at least 30 facilities in Pennsylvania we're involved in a collaborative through the Patient Safety Authority. That's a non-government agency that we report all reportable infections to, whatever. But they have a collaborative, they've asked us to be in it, and we report every month, I should say I do. I have to track all antibiotics. I have to track how many urine cultures are gotten.
Yeah.
Was there something prescribed for it? Was it an appropriate antibiotic? And what did the infection meet criteria for reportable infection? I track who the physician is who prescribes it, and then I keep tallies of how many they order per month, and are they prescribing before a culture is obtained. And it's a lot of information, but then we report to the Pennsylvania Safety Authority, and then every month we get back data that shows our data during all against all these process measures, as well as how we are doing against all those against the group.
And you're being recognized.
Yes, the Department of Health recognized us
right.
as doing extremely well. And I have to tell you, for anyone who's long-term care, you have to have buy-in from leadership. That's the administrator, that's the leader, that's health administrator, the medical director, our director of quality, our director of nursing, the infection prevention person, pharmacy plays a big part in it, as well as lab. We all are working together, and we are seeing great results. Our nursing staff really gets it, and they're really advocating for our residents. They're taking time to report cultures results back. Our physicians are doing great about, they're ordering less antibiotics and for less amount of time, and they're ordering more appropriately.
And your residents are healthier,
great.
Correct?
Right. Exactly, because because it's best practice for them.
Right.
And because of it, we have increased the health of our residents. And the biggest side effect, other than the multi-drug resistant problem with bacteria becoming resistant, is this infectious diarrhea called Clostridium difficile, or C. diff infections are horrible. If you're in a hospital and you get it, you've extended your stay 7 to 10 days. 50% of people over the age of 65 who are ill to begin with, who get a C. diff infection, will die.
Oh my God.
Tell us in the last 30 seconds about the flu.
The
flu season.
Yeah, flu season's coming. It comes every year.
I never get a flu shot. So tell me why I should get a flu shot.
I get one.
You get one? I don't get one.
It's a great idea, especially if you have elderly parents that you visit.
I do. Because
what happens is, like, we have a mandated employee vaccination program where they have to get their flu shot if they can, if they're not exempted. But it saves lives. There's data upon data, years of data that show that facilities that have high rates of employee vaccination will have less cases of flu in their facility. Flu kills people. Especially flu will kill elderly.
Right,
so now's the time to get it. Now's the time to start getting it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Before, even October. Wait till October. The vaccine is good for a year.
Yeah.
That's
but
now.
pharmacies are already pushing. But that's just them. They want you to come in. But it does. For the most part, it's not perfect. No vaccine is 100% effective.
Maybe a big 2 or 3, but if it just saves your parents, that or your children, from getting that,
Infants,
that's well worth it.
Exactly.
Mary Pat, we want to thank you so much for being here today.
It
does go by fast. It's such a critical issue, especially as we head into the season when everybody's getting sick. So we just want our viewers to make sure that they know exactly when they should get antibiotics and when they shouldn't.
Questions.
And we'll definitely put your contact information up there.
Oh, thank you.
So
Yes, I would love to answer questions. And wash your hands.
We'll put that up.
Wash your hands. That saves lives.
On that note, we'll be back for a second segment of Behind the Headlines after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. On this segment, I'm joined by Christine Constable, who is a board member of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. She is the former vice chair of the English Democrats Party and has been one of the leading businesswomen in the United Kingdom. Christine, welcome back to the show. It's been a few years since you've been with us.
Certainly has. Thank you very much for welcoming me back. Thank you, Charlie. As you know, I'm based in the UK most of the time, so I'm pleased to be back in the good old USA.
Well, and you're taking a brief tour of the United States, and you had some time to share with our viewers today. We appreciate it very much. And it couldn't be more timely. Here in the United States, many financial analysts and economists have been very concerned about something called Brexit. And we hear a great variety of opinions as to what Brexit is, what it will do, and what the United States, what the UK, United Kingdom, should do in the future. I guess I'd like to start out just, as a primer for our viewers. What is Brexit?
Yes, well, I think probably a lot of the people in the UK would like to understand what is Brexit, so you're not alone there. I suppose the boring answer to that is that back in 1975, the UK joined the European Economic Community, which was just a trading community across Europe. And as the years have gone on, various treaties have been signed with the European Union, as it is now, one of which was the Lisbon Treaty, which basically set the path for, and I hate to say this, but this is the truth, a United States of Europe. And I think from the United Kingdom's point of view, we were always under the impression we were involved in a trading organisation, no more, no less than that. And certainly that's what our politicians always used to promise us. Every time they came back from a treaty signing, you know, our red lines are safe, our sovereignty is safe, you don't need to worry, everything's good. And obviously these meetings were fiendishly complicated. People didn't really understand what was going on, so we accepted that. And then we got to a point where we realised it was a lot more than just a trading organisation. And Mr. Cameron, our former Prime Minister, decided that he wanted to give the people a chance to say, look, you know, actually, it is true, it is more than just a trading organisation. And nobody had actually asked the British people, do you really want to be part of this? And so he promised a referendum. Do you want to be part of this new United States of Europe? And we had an opportunity in June 2016 to vote. We had a national referendum. And the British people said, actually, we don't want to be part of the United States of Europe. And that is what Brexit is.
Well, this has been a theme, hasn't it, of British history, your relationship with the continent. And what is the United Kingdom's future to be? Is it to be connected to Europe and the European community? Is it to be focused on the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth? Is it our special relationship with the United States? Or could it be all these things?
Yeah, well, I think probably it should be all these things. I mean, geographically, we are placed in Europe, but I think mentally, as a country, we see ourselves as an international country. You know, obviously we have the Commonwealth. We also have our strong ties with America. And we also trade internationally with finance, which is one of our biggest opportunities for sales and business. And I think that the problem that we've got at the moment is that the European Union is very internally focused. It's always about protectionism, protecting their marketplaces, stopping competition. And I think the British view is, no, we don't want to have that. We don't want lots of subsidies. We don't want lots of protectionism. We want to be able to trade freely with the rest of the world. And to be frank, the EU prevents us from doing that.
Mm-hmm. So what does Brexit mean for the average British citizen?
Right.
What does it mean for Americans? Well, should we be concerned about it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that one of the reasons why the British people, and it was people outside of the urban conurbations who voted for Brexit, the main reason is that they've seen vast amounts of inward migration during the years that we've been part of the European project. We've seen our salaries reduce. Because of all the migration coming into the country, we've seen our productivity decline because lots of companies have thought, well, what's the point of investing in new technology if we have so much cheap labour coming in from Europe? I mean, a lot of the Eastern Europeans come over. I think Jack Straw, who used to be the Home Secretary of Labour, predicted that there would be about 10,000 Poles who would come to the UK when Poland joined the EU. And 1 million came to the UK. And yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what we felt. So it's caused huge problems with housing, with overcrowding, with the cost of welfare, because a lot of these people just come straight over. They've never contributed to the systems that we have, and yet we have to treat them as if they are British citizens, so they can have full access to the health system, full access to education and welfare and all of that. And frankly, it's crippling us. Jobs are scarce, and everything's getting to the lowest common denominator. And I think, quite frankly, the British people are fed up with it, you know. This isn't what we asked for. Nobody consulted us. We never had a vote if this was the way we wanted to go. And so what we've decided is that we want to be masters of our own destiny. I'm sure the Americans can understand that only too well. That, you know, like in the old colonial days, if you were being managed from England, now we're being managed from Brussels. And so I think our general feeling is, look, Brussels, where the European Parliament is based, where the European Commission is based, is to us an anathema to democracy, because the commissioners who make policy are not elected. They're supposedly appointed by the leaders of the 28 European countries.
They're the executive branch,
They're the executive
if you will, of
branch.
the European Union.
Precisely.
And the legislative branch of the European Union is
supposedly the Parliament, but to be honest, it's
the European Parliament.
Yeah, the European Parliament. But I have to say that it's a kind of fig leaf of democracy, because they don't actually have a lot of control over what's discussed and what legislation is put through. Their job is essentially to rubber stamp what the Commission put forward as their legislative plan. And I think increasingly, and it's not just the UK. I mean, I wouldn't like you to think Brexit is just an aberration from those pesky British. What it is, it's more to do with the fact that most of the countries in Europe feel disenfranchised. They feel a lack of control, and they're being told that they must accept immigrants from across the world, whether they like it or not. And also they must manage their economies on a one-size-fits-all basis. And that's the other big problem with the European Union. It makes no allowance for the different economic conditions of the various members within the group.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the consequences of trade.
Yes.
When we talk about Brexit, what does it mean for trade for the European Union, for the United Kingdom, for America?
Well, at the moment, the European Union is running a trade surplus with the UK. So essentially, they are importing much more to the UK than we are importing to them. And our proportion of trade to the EU has been declining over the years. I mean, one of the big sales points about the EU was that, you know, everybody's trade will boom. But in fact, that hasn't been the case. The other problem is if we want to trade with the United States, and certainly in my businesses, I represent a couple of US manufacturing companies in Africa, I can't import the same products that I import or export to Africa, to the UK, unless I pay punitive import tariffs. So certainly one of the things I would like to see are lower tariffs, or no tariffs, so that we can trade more freely with the United States, as we can with other countries. And the problem is that Germany wants to essentially, I mean, I'm being quite, you know, sort of honest about this. I mean, Germany wants to protect its marketplace, which it sees as the European area, from competition. By erecting these barriers, these tariffs, making it difficult, putting in rules and regulations, it stops other countries able to easily export to the European Union. And France, of course, a very inefficient agricultural sector, is highly dependent on subsidies to retain really quite an ineffectual agricultural sector. I mean, if it wasn't for the vast subsidies they were being given, the French agricultural economy would flatline.
Mm-hmm. Well, this goes to the European euro then, the monetary unit that had been set up. Now, Britain did not join; they kept the pound sterling.
Yes,
but what is the outlook for the euro, and what does that mean to the UK and to the rest of Europe?
Well, I think the euro has really been the honey trap that has got all these countries into a hell of a bind, because once you give up your own independent currency and join the euro, you essentially become part of this plan for a United States of Europe. At the moment, we can see that all those countries who have their currency denominated in euros will have to start preparing their financial plans really for the approval, they say for the approval of Brussels, but really it's for the approval of Germany, because Germany is underwriting the euro in a vast way. And Germany is very anxious that countries who are using the euro don't have very high public spending, don't run huge deficits, and start to try and get their balance of payments into order. And all I can see into the future is that all of these countries in the end will be beholden to Germany, because otherwise Germany will just basically say, we're not going to support your debt levels. And as you can see with the terrible things that happened to Greece, I mean, the Germans have not been very sympathetic to people who have run up debts and are unable to pay for them. No, there is no bailout there. So I just see that the freedom and sovereignty of a lot of the countries in the EU will become much diminished. You know, they're looking now at having a European Central Bank that controls the money flows for all of these countries who are in the euro. So essentially you can see it taking more the look of a single country with one exchequer.
Christine, in the last 15 seconds or so, this time has gone by way too quickly. What was the long-term outlook? What for Brexit in the United Kingdom? There's talk of having a second vote. You think a second vote will be held or not? And what does that mean?
Yeah, I think it would be civil war if we had a second vote. We've had a vote and we now have made our views clear. I think there's a great future for Britain outside of the EU. I don't believe all the scare stories that it will be disastrous. As we can see from having had the referendum, our economy has improved, our exports have risen, and I think that if we can open the doors to the world, especially to the USA, I think we'll have a very profitable and friendly future.
Well, Christine, thank you for being with us today. We hope you'll come back more frequently and we can see you more frequently.
Thank you.
And we are waiting to see what happens with Brexit, and only time will tell.
It will.
We'll see you soon. We'll see you again next week on Behind the Headlines.